It was not a busy weekend for baseball, but it was a busy weekend for former Guardians/Indians. We'll talk about that. We're going to get into some trade articles that came out, as well as some Rule 5 chatter, all on today's Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Guardians. I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is that you get podcasts. I am Jeff Ellis. This is my former co-host, Nacho the Cat, who decided he wanted to interrupt the show today before being your host here for nearly 900 episodes. And I do want to take a quick moment and say thank you. We're up to 901 subscribers last check, 99 away. So if you're not subscribed on YouTube, please do, and encourage others to. I wrote a lot of places, primarily about the draft and prospects and analytics, but now I am here for Locked On since the inception of the Baseball Network.
I am Justin Ladd. I am unfortunately not as cute as your other co-host, but we're making it work. I feel like we're balancing it. I got the brains, he's got the looks, but I always said
you make lots of money.
Yes,
bad song reference. Sorry.
Oh, I don't think I knew that one. That one flew right over my head, unfortunately.
Sorry.
Current managing editor, GuardiansBaseballInsider.com, freelancer for the News Herald Morning Journal, prospect evaluation of Prospects Live once again, and a bunch of other places before that, and then now here with you.
Yes. So without further ado, let's just dive into it. Let's start with Carlos Santana, because I think this is the more interesting of the two signings. Even though the Clevenger signing has a bigger direct impact on Cleveland, I think this is a smart signing by Pittsburgh for a couple of reasons. One, Santana was better than you think a year ago, specifically once he got to Seattle. Two, everyone in Seattle talked about what a great veteran presence he was. That Pirates team could probably use a little more leadership. Three, he's still a strong defender at first. I saw some people being like, he's a DH only. He's not. He would be, if he was Cleveland's first base option, he would be the starter there. Like outs above average, I want to say really liked him. He can still defend. And then four, he is a guy who's going to benefit from the shift change. I think I saw 98% of his at-bats were against the shift. He is a player who, yes, he's turning 37, is 37. He is getting up there, but he was still effective a year ago. He destroyed left-handed pitching, and now he doesn't have a shift anymore. Like, he's a player I could see, like, 10 years down the line, someone writing a story about he should be, like, I can see someone from Cleveland writing an article about, oh, he should have had Hall of Fame consideration because if he had played in an era without the shift, who knows what his numbers could have been. Like how we always like to go back and talk about changes. And again, I'm not saying he's a Hall of Famer, but I'm saying I can see that article already being written because the shift has been, maybe to him more than any other hitter in baseball, a huge detriment. So I like this for Pittsburgh because they're paying him under $7 million. They'll have him for half a year. He will kill left-handed pitching. He's got a chance to be even better than normal with no shift. And at the deadline, they can flip him for an asset, which is what the whole play with this is to maybe add an interesting prospect. And I think it'll pay off for them. But I think it's a good get. I think and like I said, it might be weird that this is more interesting to me than Clevinger. But we'll talk about Clevinger in a moment. Your thoughts on Los to the Pirates?
Yeah, I mean, they had G-Man Choi. He kind of balances their lineup out. The Pirates haven't had a good first base option in quite some time. At the worst, I mean, he comes in. If he improves without the shift there, they have someone they can flip at the deadline. I think that's the biggest thing for them is this is a guy they can turn around and trade at the deadline for a prospect if he pans out, and they will definitely benefit from his leadership. Still a very young team. Like I said, G-Man Choi is a platoon bat mostly. I'm kind of surprised they felt like playing someone like Carlos Santana over guys they didn't protect, like, Malcolm Nunez, I mentioned on Friday. I'm not sure why. Like, if I'm in Pittsburgh's situation, I don't think the Santana makes a whole lot of sense because not that they have a ton of great options at first base, but I mean, you're going in a direction where you should be building towards the future, and Santana's just kind of here occupying a spot from somebody who's younger that could be part of your future, possibly. I don't know. But if you feel like he can benefit from the shift, being gone, and you can flip him for a prospect, why not? If you think your locker room needs the leadership, why not? You were right. I was surprised. He had 292 plate appearances last year against the shift, and he had 200. In his 34 plate appearances where he didn't face the shift, he had 294. So that's a small sample. We don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, I would think he's going to benefit from there being no shift there. Still walks a ton, doesn't really strike out, doesn't really swing and miss a lot for a guy, and maybe the power. He's still at 19 home runs. He hasn't slugged above 400 in 3 years now. The power looks like it's kind of evaporated, but I don't know. Pittsburgh's got to be a better hitter's park for power hitters than Seattle and Kansas City, right?
Yeah, no. Look, Kansas City is okay for power. I think it comes down with Nunez. I think Pittsburgh doesn't feel like he's ready, and I think everyone thinks he can't play the field. So I know that's a limiting factor with him. But I think that's just, as you stated and as I stated, it comes down to it's a decent trade asset. Like, I could see, let's put it this way. If it got to the end of July, all of a sudden he's only owed about $3 million left. If Cleveland needs a platoon bat, they could come calling if he's having a really good year because they know him. It's easy to sit there and take a guy who's already known to you and bring him over. Now, limited flexibility, but it's a situation where I have no idea what that could look like. I'm just saying it's within the realm is all I would say. And I think there's a chance and that they're going for that. There's reasons. Like I said, Santana played well. I also think him getting $7 million was a surprise, and it also should make everyone out there reevaluate who thought that this first base market guys weren't going to get paid. So just take a second and realize if Santana got $7 million, Abreu is going to get expensive, and everyone else's price tag just went up.
Yep, for sure. Definitely can guess that's going to raise the price tag on everybody, especially if Santana ends up having a good year.
Now, in terms of Clevinger, I think the saddest people today were the Los Angeles Dodgers. They absolutely murdered him this year. And here's the thing, Clevinger has dealt with health issues from before he came to Cleveland. He had health issues in Cleveland. The White Sox are betting that he is able to come back healthy now, 2 years removed. I don't know if financials ever came out, but I mean, that is a paper thin rotation. $8 million. So he barely got more than Santana got, which is kind of interesting to think about. But they have multiple pitchers with health concerns and issues, and Clevinger, frankly, just wasn't very good. Nothing was there. I, as a Guardians fan, it was almost like, hey, this is a free agent signing for them. I don't, at age 32, with that health history, has he ever thrown 180 innings? I don't know if he ever will. Like this just, I think maybe they couldn't get Cueto for $8 million, but I think going from Cueto to Clevinger is a drop off.
Well, I would probably guess Clevenger's ceiling is a little higher than Cueto. I can't imagine Cueto. There. I don't know. I think there's a chance he can rebound. Remember, he was coming off of his second Tommy John, and he wasn't terrible last season. He had his moments. I wonder what it'll look like, another year removed from that. Begin up with last year, 4.33 ERA. I would guess that comes down just a little bit. Although
his FIP was a 5, and again it'll be 32.
Yeah. The fastball was down. Yeah, I think there's some issues there for sure. The fact that he got $8 million, and I don't know what Cueto is going to get. If Cueto gets more, I'd still be surprised because that's a guy who is relying on strike throwing at this point in his career. But I will say that the reactions I saw from White Sox fans today, just on Twitter. I know Twitter is sometimes we mistake it for being a good judge of real life and real society, and it's not. But the reactions I saw from White Sox fans that I personally, who are writers and fans I consider to be very reasonable and knowledgeable, they were like, they weren't like excited about it. Some of them were not thrilled, but nobody was like really like, oh, this is a great move. This is going to be a nice addition to the rotation. Those people are all were either in the middle on it, like, okay, fine, I guess he replaces Cueto, whatever. Other people were like, yeah, I don't know how this is going to work out. Like the reactions weren't great.
This is a perfect, and this might be me being a jerk, but I think this is the perfect way to like test, like if someone's worth following. Like anyone who came out and is like, oh, the White Sox have the potential to have the nastiest rotation in baseball. Like that's a person who doesn't know baseball. Cease is amazing, but Lynn, things backed up on a little bit last year.
Giolito
Kopech
regressed.
had health. Giolito's regressed for 2 straight years. I mean, that's a rotation with question marks all up and down. It's not to say Cleveland's is perfect, but and again, like my whole issue with Clevinger here is age 32 is a hard year to start coming back from things when he was never out of shape, but this was never a guy who like was focused on his body being a temple. He was focused on his mind as a pitcher and his development of his pitches. But like the pitchers who tend to last longer are the ones who were, really
take care of their body.
Yeah, take care of their bodies. And not to say he doesn't, but he was much more of he had natural talent and then a cerebral approach, which I know is weird to say because most people look at Clevinger as not a cerebral guy. But when it came to pitching, he put in the time and the effort.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as people tend to like ding him, it's like, no, as a pitcher, he was a cerebral dude. I can't speak to anything beyond pitching, but I can tell you on that mound, he was, very intelligent. So I don't know. Sure. I wish him well. I don't have anything. That Clevinger deal is looking like a mini Cologne deal for Cleveland right now in terms of the return for both sides. But I thought it was interesting. Really nothing happened this weekend outside of those former Guardians.
I'm not surprised at all. I don't think this is probably going to be a pretty rough week for us to get through. I think I said it on Friday. I said that the week between the holidays and or I should say Thanksgiving and Rule 5. The winter meetings might as well just be the Rule 5 draft because nothing else ever really happens there anymore. But at least we get some news and some rumors coming out of it. But yeah, the week between Thanksgiving and the winter meetings is usually pretty dry for news. So let's hope it's a little bit better. Before we move on to a break real quick, I wanted to also point out you're right on judging follow, because if somebody said Mike Clevinger really makes that rotation really good, that is perfectly what I like to call is I know that name. People's like, oh, that's a name I know, so he must be good. Like that's the casual baseball fan mantra. I know that name, so he must be good. Doesn't matter if it was a guy I knew 5-6 years ago. If I know that name, he's got to be a good baseball player, and that automatically means he's good right now, no matter what the context is. Those fans they drive me nuts. They just do. So you're right.
No, and there are people trying to pass themselves off as like experts who I saw with that. So it's just like, ooh. But if you need expert information, then you should be heading to our good friends over at BetOnline, because they're going to give you expert information when it comes to just about everything in sports. If you need, lines on games, if you want to know the odds someone's going to sign somewhere, head over to BetOnline today. They have you covered. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline. I've even seen them in the past have elections as something they cover. It goes beyond sports at BetOnline. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And I haven't checked, but last time we did check BetOnline, the only thing in terms of free agency listed was Cleveland being someone for Aaron Judge. Way down the list, because I think they just tracked I like your head shake. Yeah, it's not happening. But I think they literally put odds for every team in that. So, yeah, go check out BetOnline. Great source of information. Just realize they literally gave every team a chance for Aaron Judge. Let's talk about articles now. So Anthony C., I'm going to say, so I don't butcher his last name. I'll leave that to you to say his name correctly in a moment, posted a piece about trades. And it was interesting because I know Friday's show, you talked about Jim Bowden and his trades. And again, I will point out Jim Bowden got his job because his start because he was roommates with the owner of the Pirates' son. That's literally fell into something and worked his way backwards up a ladder. And I'm not much of a fan. So there's my statement. He's not very good. And then Anthony Castroneves is very good. I actually like him. So I don't want to seem to disparage him. But I thought like in that piece, it was a little inconsistent in terms of some of the trade values put on certain players or situations. But the interesting takeaway was his statement that like the reason a Murphy trade didn't happen in this middle of the year was Cleveland's unwillingness to trade a starter. And I assume it was one of the big three, maybe even one of the big two. I can't remember if he went into specifics. And then finally says Valera and Williams for Murphy. I know everyone loves
Rocchio.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Not Valera, Rocchio and Williams for Murphy. Honestly, I don't think that gets it done. So I don't think that's enough. And I know people are out there saying, what? Well, I think Rocchio was probably like 5th or 6th in system. They had them at 3 and 4 based on the pipeline. I don't think they're 3 and 4. I think it's like 3 and 6. And you're going to need additional pieces. And so I got into a big thing on Friday about this. What people need to realize is the whole idea of there's no such thing as a pitching prospect is bunk. Especially with all the data we have today. Once these guys are in AA and AAA, your pitching prospects are more legit than your hitting prospects. We know how to interpret that data more. There are certain guys who get up here. Look at the year Spencer Torkelson had. Look at the year Riley Green had. We're like, what went wrong? What do we? And there's, we haven't really gotten into the whole zone of like, okay, you hear the rumors that George Valera is not going to be able to hit anything low in the zone, but we don't have statistical things to really prove that at our level. Teams might. But with pitchers, there is so much data now and so much analytics going in that when you get a guy to double in AAA, their spin rate, their pitch mix, if it is going to be successful. And pitchers don't fail unless it's injuries or that they weren't good enough because of controller command. Pitching prospects in the upper minors are more secure bets, going back to our sponsor there, than hitting prospects. Like all 3 of those pitching prospects, when we talk about Bybee, we talk about Williams, we talk about Espino. 2 of those 3 have massive injury concerns at points in their career, but I still have them head and shoulders above the next 3 hitters in system because overall, as long as they're healthy, we know they're going to be successful. We have enough data on these guys that we know they will be successful. So I get Cleveland saying we're not going to trade those pitching prospects because they are sure things. And listen, Plesac and Zavali are on their way out. You got 3 guys at the top you feel kind of good about, but one of them is going to be gone in 2 years. I think they'll stick to that. I don't think they're going to be willing to trade either of those 3 pitchers, and I think they're going to slowly work them in. And eventually the hope for this team as you go down the road is that, it's going to be McKenzie in those 3 arms, and then who knows in the 5 spot in like 3 years' time.
Yeah, the only way I can see them trading one of the big 3 pitching prospects is if it's like in a deal for another controllable pitcher that can help them right now and for the next 2 or 3 years. Like, I don't think it's going to happen, but I could see, and I'm even more skeptical about this, but I could see like, I'm going to bring up my favorite team again, Gavin Williams being dealt for Corbin Burns or Brandon Woodruff. Like if that might be possible because they're getting a pitcher back who they have 2 years of control over who can help them now and next year if they decide to kind of bankroll those years and just see what happens after. But like I said, even I'm a little skeptical about them actually pulling the trigger on something like that. But that's the only scenario I can see that happening in. If they didn't say yes to one of Espino or Williams mid-season for Sean Murphy, I don't think that's changed by any means right now. And is there a package without those 2 that get it done? I don't know. You'd have to. It depends. We don't know what Oakland values. Like we can see what prospects they like based on who they traded for in the past and the players they draft. We can take a look at, okay, this is some of the profiles they tend to like. We could see if Cleveland matches up that way. But in the end, you just don't know. You don't know what they see on Cleveland players. And from the outside looking in, from our perspective, it seems like a very hard deal. As good as this system is, because you've got to look at it from Oakland's perspective, they're not going to be good this year. They're not going to be good next year. Like earliest we're talking here is 2025 for them, right? So Rocchio is already on the 40-man roster. Gavin Williams doesn't have to be for a couple of years, so that fits. But that's why Cleveland's not going to move him right now. So you have to find prospects that are, if you're not willing to trade, and it may not be possible, you'd have to maybe deal one of the pitchers. That's probably why they want Williams, because Williams is still a few years away from being added to the 40. You would have to find a number of prospects in Cleveland's system that either just got added, so we're talking Angel Martinez or Joey Cantillo, or you got to find prospects Oakland likes that are like up for adding next year or 2 years from now. So like a Logan Allen and that type, you know what I mean? Like Angel Janau, maybe if they like that, but that's like your 4th piece in the deal. So that's the only way you're probably looking is you gotta fit their timeline in a deal. And if Cleveland's not going to deal one of those pitching prospects, it's a lot harder. But yeah, I don't see that deal getting. Rocchio and Williams, even if Cleveland was willing to trade Williams, Rocchio and Williams are not getting that deal done.
And like I think one of the other problems just in general for Cleveland is you have that big three, which depending on your view of Cody Morris could maybe be a big four. But after those three and maybe Morris, who again has been on the 40 for a bit now and has had some service time. Logan Allen had a down second half. Then like who's next up? Is it Justin Campbell, who they just drafted? Is it Gaddis? Is it Curry? Like all of those guys right now are third or fourth pieces in a deal. They really don't have a second tier of starters beyond those guys that are either, a few years ago when they had guys like Torres and Hankins, who we'll talk about in segment 3 a bit, like when they were first round picks and they were interesting players before injuries and conditioning and the like hit them. When you had some of those guys who were interesting but far away, like that would help you out right now, but they just don't have that. They have the big three, maybe big four, and then kind of more guys who profile as back end starters. And that's just not going to be a top 2 piece situation.
Nope. Yeah, your lead piece. I kind of struggle with Valera being enough as a lead piece here. Like, could you say that if Oakland really valued Valera, could they be convinced to go with Joey Cantillo and somebody further down in the system? I don't know, a Jack Leftwich or a Doug Nikhazy or he said Justin Campbell, and I don't even know, can they even trade Justin Campbell yet? Is that even
off season?
Okay, so he can be traded. Yeah, that would be the only way that really works out. But I don't think Valera is a strong enough piece at this moment for Oakland, because of their situation mostly, and I don't know it. Like you said, the 1-to-1, the correlation for pitcher data to the majors is a little bit easier to read than it is hitters. So you're right. And I think a lot of teams probably, I would guess, feel that way. I mean, I'm sure they have more hitting data they feel comfortable with judging guys on than we do on the outside, but it would seem that pitching correlates a little bit better. So that's why they're going to ask for pitching. And I don't think Oakland's got a great system for pitching, but right now. So
and Cleveland's also hurt by some of the lack of draft success, right? Like Tanner Burns and Carson Tucker, Tommy Mace, Doug Nikhazy. I think that those are all very high picks who you look at and go, these guys have never really been top 10 players in the system or even close to it. And they have so much depth, so many guys who have hit, and you're going to hit and miss. But it is interesting how much of this system is driven by guys who, Espino and Williams were first rounders, but they've also kind of, Bybee was a later guy. Naylor was a first, but they've had some recent misses that I think also hurts, where they've, if Nikhazy had pitched or Mace like they had hoped, maybe they would have been the trade asset you're looking for in this deal, but that just hasn't come to be so far. Things can change.
And I'm sure some people, I've seen some people mention like Will Dion, and I'm like, no one's taking anything from low A at this point. Like that.
Yes.
If Oakland really liked Will Dion, you could add Will Dion, but that would be like your 4th or 5th piece at that point. Like at this point, nothing against Will Dion. Nice kid. I got to talk to his dad a little bit. Very nice kid. Just no one's taking anything in low A right now that seriously to make him a strong trade piece.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to talk some Rule 5 here in a second. The interesting thing is going through and looking at teams Rule 5. It's like a lot of teams just didn't protect guys, even if they were top 10 prospects who were in low A, because they weren't afraid of anyone taking them because the value is just lower on those guys right now. Maybe the lowest it's ever been. So yeah, it's not a knock on those guys. It's just teams want upper level prospects. And that is the thing where Cleveland has great pitching depth, but it is a lot of depth. We're going to take break number 2 at this point in the show. We're going to come back, do some Rule 5 chatter. Jim Callis had an interesting piece saying who he thought the Guardians could lose. We're going to debate, discuss, and also talk about, would the Guardians take anyone in the Rule 5 this year? Trevor Steffens is the greatest Rule 5 selection in franchise history. Could they have someone to challenge him? Stay tuned and find out. But first, let's talk about our friends over at Simply Safe. Let me spell it out for you because, sometimes names don't match how we think it is. So Simply Safe, SIMPLISAFE, is, the people to go to for home security. We sat there and talked with Lindsay recently from Prospects. He uses it. I always bring up how much I rely on U.S. News and World Report's #1 security system 3 years running. If you want professional security, especially around the holidays, if you want to have the ability to have someone watching your back when those packages get delivered when you're at work, Simply Safe is the company to go with. Trusted in an emergency or just in everyday home security, go to simplysafe.com and specifically go to simplysafe/locked. I can't speak today. simplysafe.com/lockedonMLB. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedonMLB. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That is simplysafe.com/lockedonMLB. There is no safe like Simply Safe, and since I butchered it a dozen times, that is simplysafe.com/lockedonMLB. So Jim Callis recently came out with a piece because the Rule 5, MLB is slow. So Rule 5 drives a lot of the niche fan, people who are listening to the shows, what a team could do, what might occur. We've been talking about Cleveland's crunch for years. And it was interesting that when he had to list a player, there was no one from Cleveland's top 30 prospects on the MLB side of things that was not protected. And he went with Ethan Hankins. And, Hankins is there's, my cough to go with the interrupt from the beginning. Hankins was a first-round pick who at points had top 10 hype in that draft year. He was right up there with Kumar Rocker as a pair of high schoolers together. Fastball slider combo that was electric. Like you saw a very easy path to potential frontline starter or, excellent reliever. Then, 2020 happened. He didn't get to pitch. He also had some conditioning issues, which, Callis never mentions things like this, but he straight out states that because of Hankins had his development because of pandemic. I swear he said it somewhere in here. But I have read it's out there. There were some conditioning issues. Right. And he started to really looking good and like getting back fully into playing shape. Then he had Tommy John, and he just hasn't had as many opportunities this year. He's thrown 64 innings, even though he's been in the system for 4 years. So it's a very limited track record. And here's just the honest goodness truth. I know a lot of people know him because he's a first round pick with a big name. I don't think if I was to make a list of the top 20 right-handers in the system, not starters, just right-handers, I'm not sure he makes that top 20. If I were to make a list of the top 12 right-handed pitchers in the system, he doesn't make that for me. So it's a little bit much ado about nothing. A, because who's going to draft him when there's very limited data and a lot of that data isn't great? And B, you'd be drafting him based on his high school data, which was, 2018 now. That's a long time ago. You don't use 4-year-old data to add someone to your roster. And then, I think there's honestly better options to take from Cleveland's system. If you're targeting someone, this isn't to say that here I'm not talking about him the same way like we're talking about Cantillo. There's nothing that says he can't have a full bounce back, have that fully healthy season, be 2 years back from Tommy John, and just be the machine that we thought he could be when he was drafted, when he had that talk of being, a top 10 prospect in system. But Ethan Hankins, do you have any thought he could be taken?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think a lot of teams are going to see he's just missed so much time and has not. I was going to say, you can put him on the injured list. Like his Tommy John's over. He rehabbed this entire year. He threw one competitive inning in 2022, because of some health-related stuff that didn't have to do with Tommy John or injuries in general. But, the guy hasn't pitched since 2019, and the highest he got was low A in Lake County, back when Lake County was the low A team. And I know some people will bring up the Luis Oviedo examples. We've talked about this. Luis Oviedo hadn't missed this much time, and he was playing winter ball, and he was hitting 97, 98 when the Pirates took him. But look what happened. It didn't work out. Luis Oviedo was terrible. The Pirates had to let him go. He's back in Cleveland's system now. So that's a test case that stuff doesn't work. And look, I saw Hankins in 2019. The stuff was still promising. Like you still, when you watched him, you could see the outline of a very electric pitcher, like we talked about. But he did have, conditioning issues back then, and he has since gotten that under control. I will say, to be fair to Ethan, he is in much better shape than he was back in 2019. But I just can't see him sticking on a roster for a full season. Like I kind of gave a quick glance at the other teams that are out there. Would the Cubs be interested? Because obviously you've got guys in the Cubs GM was Cleveland's former assistant GM. Could he be interested in a guy he was around for drafting? Maybe, but I don't see how he thinks that Ethan Hankins is going to stick on a big league roster all year. Same with the Pirates, same with the Reds. Like, those are teams that could use somebody from the Rule 5 draft, but I just don't see how all those teams feel like Ethan Hankins sticks all year on a big league roster. Even if you give him the Phantom IL, it's like you've still got him in the active roster for 90 days. Like, okay, Oakland and I don't know, the Nationals. Maybe the Nationals will be interested. But even if he gets taken, even if he gets taken, I just don't see how it turns out where they lose him. And Lenny Torres, we're going to talk about that. I don't think he's even close to being an option either. But
just to go back, the Hankins stuff, because I was reading up on Hankins today for this, it came from Eric Longenhagen, where it was that the exact quote was, his stuff and conditioning fluctuated during the early portion of his pro career too, but he had a strong showing at the alternate site and was nails throughout instructs, appeared a little more svelte, and things were looking better. And then Tommy John. So that's where I got that from. It wasn't from Callis. It was from Eric Longenhagen. And it's not the first time I'd seen that. So I just wanted to make sure that I was making the right attribution. But yeah, I think, I mean, who's going to take him based on limited innings? It just seems like that's not how it works.
The Nationals, the only team I can really see, because they do like his kind of arm, if you look at some of their history, but it's just, I think everyone's going to weigh the risk, and there's got to be, I don't know everybody who's available. You can look at
Jim Gallison's Tajane Thomas, like former Guardians, Thomas, he's got similar stuff, or Antoine Kelly with the Rangers. I mean, if you want to go for a high ceiling, Juan Ramos with the Dodgers, who's unprotected. Like, I just think there's more interesting. I mean, Nunez with the Pirates, like guys who make more sense, who have at least played in the upper minors. And like I said, in a year's time, Hankins could be, in that top 10 discussion. I'm not stating anything other than we just haven't seen him. And before we saw him, it was not a clean track record, and that all teams know that. And that's going to affect.
This is a big year for him.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a big year. He'll be 23 when come May. So this will be his age 23 season. He has not thrown a pitch. He threw one inning in the complex league this year. So it's a big year. I just don't see anybody letting him last on a roster. There are better options available if you're looking for that style of pitcher.
Yes.
To sit on your roster all year, there are better options that you might have a shot at keeping all season.
Yeah, they took Bo Naylor. Did they have 3 firsts, or was Torres the second? No, they had 3 firsts somehow, right?
Torres and Hankins were both competitive balance picks. Yeah. Yeah. So
comp picks, yeah. One was competitive balance, I think, and one was comp. I can't think who it was comp for. I'm sure there's someone yelling at their screen now.
Santana to the Phillies.
Did they? I don't think that.
Yeah, because this was a 2018 amateur draft. So, I think Torres was the competitive balance pick, and I think Hankins was the comp pick for Santana. Going to the Phillies.
I wasn't sure that they offered him the qualifying offer. I guess I'd completely forgotten if they had or hadn't.
I'm pretty sure they did.
I'm going to look it up just because I'm curious. But yeah, I mean, that draft, hopefully, Naylor will come through, but it is, health. That's the thing. And again, I know there's people like you said, that pitching prospect thing earlier. Again, the clarification is the difference between a guy who's pitching in AAA, AA versus low A. And yes, that is why when you read my draft stuff, I'm always very anti-prep pitcher in general, because you have to get them all the way up there.
Right.
You got to hope that they can climb the ladder, and, it's not going to be a Jay Groom situation. If you want a recent example of a guy who's, it was at points had 1-1 hype and then hasn't come together for. So once they get up the ladder, I wouldn't trade those guys. I just would not. But at the lower level, I think the risk is still too high. Who do you think is most likely to go?
From Cleveland's unprotected list?
Yes.
Off the top of my head, I'm going to go ahead and guess Nick Enright is probably an easy pick for somebody. I don't see any reason why he can't stick in the bullpen this year.
See, I was thinking Miklo Jack or Misiasic.
Yeah, Misiasic's probably going to be an interesting case because Cleveland people have talked about him as being a potential ad for Cleveland as a lefty, and there's some interesting traits with his arm. Kyle Marmon, I don't know where he'll go. I've seen stuff on him in the past where people, if there's a very data-driven organization that likes the pitch metrics on him, I could see that. It's all relievers to me. I think all these relievers are the most likely ones because obviously we know that's what sticks. I think position player wise, I don't know. I guess it depends on what other teams think of David Fry. Maybe, but he didn't get protected last year and didn't get picked last year, so I think it's unlikely. I think it's
draft last year.
Oh,
just before someone says in the comments.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so the Brewers weren't going to protect him though, and Cleveland decided not to. He was a player named later, so they didn't have to do that. But I guess if a team thinks that David Fry can catch, maybe there's something interesting there. I don't see anybody else. I think that's it. It's a bunch of relievers, and then maybe David Fry. Oh, I'm sorry, Gabriel Rodriguez. Gabriel Rodriguez is like the one guy I would think twice about because of the major signing bonus when he was an international prospect, and he had a good year this year, and he's hurt, so you could stash him on the IL all next year, a lot of next year because of the shoulder injury. You could potentially take a risk there if you really feel like if there was any team out there that liked him as an amateur that was maybe interested in him and Cleveland outbid them, maybe they would go fishing back in those waters. So that's about it. You
were right. Santana was the comp pick for Hankins, and then the competitive balance was for Torres. Yeah, it's an interesting group of players. We've talked about Jake McCarthy, who was also a comp A pick, and Xavier Edwards, who was traded. So some interesting names. I know they're getting on us for running long. This will be the last long show this week. I promise I totally can't keep. But we also talked, let's be honest, this roster has very few moving pieces. Like we kind of know outside of a few parts what the 26-man roster will look like. And, talk about our old friend, Tony Lastoria, roster fodder really doesn't exist. There's maybe like two guys who probably make the most sense to potentially be let go, but they only have, a few spots. I would put the odds of them drafting someone as very low. So of course now they'll do it. Watch them add someone like, I don't know. I talked about on the show, like TJ Sakima, just because he's a lefty, or Nolan Hoffman, who's the side armor. We talked about Nunez, but again, they don't like non-flexible guys. And then Campos with the Dodgers is so far away, even though he had 19 home runs. Like, there's interesting names. Antoine Kelly, talked about the Rangers, has been a hot name of late, but like, where would they put him?
I could see them taking somebody, but the guy has to be there. I think they have some guys they're interested in, but the guy's got to be there for them to take. And then number two, they'd have to make some moves to move things around on the roster. Because we said, the only guys that really you would maybe move on from are Benson or Palacios. I know some people are going to say Owen Miller, but Owen Miller has options and he's going to be depth, and he has a track record in the minors. And I'd be surprised if they're not going to DFA on number one. They might trade him maybe if they have somebody else in mind. But I think at this point he is like a safety net for them, and if they can't upgrade his spot, so they won't move him in any shape or form until they feel like they've upgraded his spot, if that's their choice. I still don't see how Palacios has a role on this team in the next couple of years. So he seems like a guy you could trade for cash, international money, a very low level prospect, and you can clear a spot that way because he doesn't have a spot here, and there probably is some team out there who could use him. But that's and maybe Will Benson. But I would definitely move on from Palacios before I move on from Will Benson.
One has a position, one does not. Like, just simple as that.
I know. They really shoehorned him in at left, and they let it go. He is a left fielder DH now. It's unfortunate. Some team might be able to play him at second base because he has in the past, and that makes him more valuable. But Cleveland clearly is not going to and doesn't believe he should. So that limits what he can do in Cleveland.
Yeah, I think that about sums it up. We will have more Rule 5 chatter, I'm sure, throughout the week goes, random rumors. We will also do our Rule 5 history piece, I believe, this week. If the Rule 5 next week. And we're still trying to hammer things down with some prospects and guys on the 40-man who might make appearances. So make sure you tune in. Get us up over 1,000. I will see. Last check, we were at 903. So that's 97 away. 905. So 95 away. So please subscribe. Get a friend to subscribe. Let's get over that 1,000. Thank you all. And the way we end every show, go Guardians, go.